I might be a bit biased when I say this, but I think that kobolds are actually shaping up to be one of the best player ancestries in all of Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Now I know that might be a stretch, but they definitely are better than what they were in Pathfinder 1st Edition and D&D 5e. In both of those, they had negative ability scores and sunlight sensitivity, but now they have ability scores that are on par with all the other ancestries, and have full dark vision without sunlight sensitivity. The only thing that I could even consider a drawback about kobolds in 2nd edition is that they have some of the lowest starting hit points. Their base HP is 6, and they also unfortunately have a constitution flaw, but keep in mind that elves also have the same base HP and flaw. This actually makes the kobold a really versatile race, because they can make any key ability score an 18 from the start of the game without taking optional flaws. As for their other ability boosts, they gain Dexterity and Charisma. Those boosts match up to the key ability score of 11 out of the 18 classes in the game, but since you also get a free ability boost, your choices are basically limitless. But a kobold isn't just their stats. They are descended from dragons, and thus must choose a Draconic Exemplar. A kobold's exemplar isn't just for determining their breath weapons or resistance, but being an exemplar of a dragon also serves to determine your scale color, appearance, and even mannerisms. For example, a kobold with a green exemplar will have green scales, a more savage look that perhaps includes a frontal horn, and may even be more secluded, prideful, and have an affinity for druidism. As a DM, I'd really only enforce scale color matching one's exemplar, but when I'm making characters, it's really fun to have mechanics such as this informing the flavor of what I'm making. All kobolds are exemplars of dragons to some extent, but what makes them truly unique is actually their heritage. A heritage is what informs a character's ancestral background. It's sorta like subraces, but ancestral heritages aren't really genetic. A cave climber kobold, for instance, grew up in vertical warrens. They gain the combat climber skill feat, their climbing successes get upgraded to critical successes, and they're so good at climbing that they don't even need their hands free, just their feet and tail. They can get completely out of reach of many enemies and still be fully effective as casters or archers. I have to say that this heritage is one of the most powerful ancestries I've seen just because of that alone. While we're on the subject of climbing, there's also the Cavern Kobold. These guys are faster climbers, though only on rocky surfaces. They need their hands free to climb, but they climb at half speed on success, or full speed on critical success. Their squeeze checks also get upgraded to critical successes. These kobolds shine when there are ledges to climb up to and stand on top of, rather than hanging off the walls like the cave climbers, but I'd still say that the cave climbers are a bit more powerful than this. Moving on to something more draconic, a dragon-scaled kobold gains the resistance of their draconic exemplar. Resistance in Pathfinder 2e is a flat reduction in damage, so a level 4 kobold of red origin reduces all fire damage by 2. While it's sorta low, it is a good heritage if you're on the front lines. Spell-scaled kobolds get an extra cantrip from the arcane spell list, which works off of your charisma. In most cases, you'll want to take a cantrip that doesn't require attack rolls or save DCs, such as a shield cantrip or prestidigitation. An extra cantrip, like shield, can be really nice for squishy frontliners who otherwise don't have any cantrips. The Strongjaw Kobold gets a d6 unarmed attack. As usual for these, ancestral unarmed attacks aren't all that great, so it's really only useful as a last resort or if you're trying to make a character that's built around it. As for the Tunnel Flood Kobold, they're pretty simple. You get a swim speed of 15 feet, which lets you move through water with a stride action, as opposed to the swim action. Swimming mechanics in Pathfinder 2e are pretty clear but deceptively deadly, so consider these rules before taking a dip. And for the final heritage of the Kobold, we get the Tail Toxin. This is an action that you can use to apply poison to your weapons. This poison has no save, so it automatically deals poison damage equal to your level. It may not be great at low levels, but if a level 10 kobold can apply 10 persistent damage that's pretty difficult to get rid of, it starts adding up fast. I would take this on martial characters who have extra actions that they don't necessarily want to use on iterative attacks. And that's it for heritages. It may seem like there are a lot of choices to make, but we didn't even go over versatile heritages, which lets you play as a tiefling, Azamar, or vampire kobold. Really, the concepts are just limitless with this, but to keep the video short, let's just jump right into the Kobold feats. So as with many ancestries, a Kobold's feats can generally be grouped into archetypal categories. As I see it, Kobolds can be broken down into Trapmasters, Draconic Scions, Sneaky Stabbers, and Cringe Kobolds. But before we do get into those, we have to cover the generalized feats, which every ancestry gets in some form. These feats provide skill increases related to the ancestry via the lore feats, and proficiency with weapons common to that ancestry. They're kind of weaker than other ancestry feats, but Kobolds actually get access to some really good weapons through the weapon familiarity feat. So think of a pickaxe combined with a Swiss Army knife, and you'll get the tricky pick. It's a one-handed weapon that deals d6 damage, but its real power comes from its crazy traits. First you get Backstabber, which gives you more damage against flat-footed enemies. Not much, but it adds up. The biggest kicker though is the Fatal D10. Your crits now work off of D10 dice, and because of the Fatal trait, you add another D10 on the end. Oh, and the Backstabber is also doubled on crits. In total damage, I believe that the Tricky Pick is probably the best weapon in the game for one-handed crits. Nothing else really comes close to this, and its only downside is that it's not a finesse weapon. But what is a finesse weapon is the Fangwire. Intended to be used as a garrote, the Fangwire is the perfect assassin's tool. Agile, Finesse, and Backstabber already make this really good on rogues, but what's even better is that it has the grapple ability and deadly d8 for those sweet crits. While it's not necessarily going to be your main weapon, it's a great offhand option, or just for use in sneaky takedowns. Now that that's out of the way, we can talk about what truly makes Kobolds unique. Starting with the Kobold Trapmaster, these Kobolds are the undisputed masters of snare setting in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Their first feat, Snare Setter, gives them training in crafting, access to all Kobold snares, and the snare crafting skill feat. At first glance, it seems like they get a lot here, but on closer inspection this is sort of a broken feat. First of all, it requires that you're trained in crafting, so you'll just be getting some other skill instead. Second, there are no Kobold-specific traps in the game, so that's out too. And as for snare crafting, that's just a skill feat that you can get via either the Sewer Dragon background or just with your second level selection. Even if you're playing as a trap-focused character, I'd avoid this feat in favor of another one. But the good news is that the rest of the feats only require the snare crafting skill feat, so we can continue on our journey with Snare Genius. This feat essentially lets you create 3 snares for free every day, which increases when you gain Master and Legendary crafting. That's already great, but in addition, your snares cause enemies to become flat-footed until the end of your next turn. It's not often that you can impose flat-footed so easily and for so long, so that's honestly the best part about this feat. Otherwise, those free snares stack with other feats that grant you free snares, from the Ranger class and the Snarecrafter archetype. A Ranger Kobold with the Snarecrafter archetype has the most incredibly debilitating traps in the game, but as we'll see, even a Kobold Cleric that only has the Ancestral trap feats can be really good. Now let's talk about Snare Commando. These Kobolds have learned to take advantage of their traps, either using them as a distraction or an opportunity to demoralize their opponents. Obviously, this feat should only really be taken on stealthy or intimidating characters, but on those characters, it's a great use of their reaction. But finally, we get to Vicious Snares. Kobolds with this feat know how to deal the most damage with traps, adding an extra 1d6 precision damage or 2d6 if you're a legendary crafter. You really can't say no to extra damage, especially when that damage is occurring off of your turn. With just the tiniest bit of preparation and forethought, a Kobold can basically end fights before they even start. So if you really want to play with traps, the Kobold Trapmaster has to be the obvious choice. But not all Kobolds are geniuses with traps. Some choose to foster their innate connections to the dragons. Since Kobolds are so closely connected to the dragons, they have many feats that bring about some of that draconic magic and physicality. Or in the case of the Draconic Sycophant, you just know dragons better than anybody else. This feat grants you a +2 bonus to perception and saving throws against dragons, and when you encounter a dragon, you may be able to stop its wrath by making an impression immediately, rather than having to spend a whole minute doing it. Even if you fail that first impression, you can still try to spend a minute making that impression, as long as it wasn't already hostile and tearing your head off. This feat's a great pick for kobolds who like dragons, but what kobold doesn't? Also at first level is Dragon's Presence, which focuses on the intimidating side of dragons. These kobolds try to emulate a dragon's bravado in the face of fear, but they'll either critically succeed or critically fail with no in-between. These kobolds are also as good as dragons when intimidating creatures weaker than them, gaining a +1 to intimidation against creatures of their level or lower. This feat's really good, but as long as you have a high will save. If not, this feat may do more harm than good. Moving on, you can also get Kobold Breath at level 1. This gives you a breath weapon according to your Draconic Exemplar, and while it's just 1d4 damage, it does increase in power and recharges fairly quickly. This ability is awesome for frontline characters and can even be upgraded by feats like Dragon's Breath. That feat is an alternate form of Kobold Breath that upgrades the dice to d8s and doubles the size of the effect. It recharges higher, but it's still only an hour, so I would probably use Dragon's Breath exclusively from now on, just because of how much damage you can dish out with it. We also have to talk about Dragonblood Paragon, which upgrades your choice of a few abilities. Since it's also level 9, you will probably pick Dragon's Breath first and then take this later if you really want to. It is a good upgrade for your breath weapon though, adding even more damage in the form of 3d4 persistent damage. Applying all that persistent damage to multiple creatures is crazy good, and it all recharges in just 1d4 rounds, or 1 hour in the case of Dragon's Breath. The upgrades to heritages here aren't all that great, but we will talk about Dracmaster soon. But now that we've finished the breath weapon line, let's go back up to level 5 and talk about winglets. This starts you on the path to Draconic Wings, but for now all they do is help you jump higher. It might not seem great, but combine this with Cave Climber Kobolds and you'll have some really nice vertical mobility. These wings do upgrade at level 13 in the form of Hatchling Flight. This gives you an action that lets you fly at half your speed once per round. Suffice to say, it's more mobility, and more mobility is better. But what is best is Permanent Flight, coming from Wormling Flight at level 17. With this, you gain a flying speed equal to your walking speed, and although flight is really good, getting this at level 17 is a little late when magic will probably do the job for you. Nevertheless, it's a great capstone for a line of feats that's all about vertical mobility. Jumping back down the list again, we should talk about Draconic. These kobolds are able to harness the innate magic of their Draconic Exemplars. You choose one first and second level from that dragon's list, which is found under the Spellcaster section of their stats. For instance, if you're a red exemplar, you could choose True Strike and Resist Energy. Whatever you choose, having extra spells that you can cast per day is great on a caster, but a martial character can get great buff spells from this too. Just keep in mind that these spells are arcane, charisma-based spells, so if you're not one of those spellcasters, you'll probably want to take utility or buff spells. It does get better with Elite Dracomancer at level 13, which lets you take 3rd and 4th level spells. With spells like Haste and Stone Skin in this range, you've got plenty of amazing options that'll be on top of the spells you already have from earlier. If you don't know what to choose at these levels, you really can't go wrong with Dracomancer. So that's all the Draconic Scion feats. It's fair to say that kobolds really have an affinity for dragons, and these feats help you capitalize on that. Taking these on a character themed around dragons is a no-brainer, but even just going for the wing feats can add tons of flavor to any character. While kobolds have this affinity for dragons, some capitalize more on ancestral tactics to defend their homes. Much of what a sneaky stabber does is all about guerrilla fighting and hit and run tactics, so if you're looking to play a roguish character, these are the feats for you. Starting with the Scamper feat, you become better at disengaging from enemies, upgrading your movement to 30 feet and giving you extra AC against attacks of opportunity. The only caveat is that this movement has to end away from an enemy. Regardless, it's really good for dipping in and out of combat. Your other choice at level 1 is Slither, granting you the Quick Squeeze skill feat and upgrading your squeezes to critical successes. While squeezing doesn't seem to come up that often, a creative kobold might find ways to use it as a means of escape from enemies who probably can't crawl after you. But if you'd rather do more damage, the next feat you'll find is at level 9, Between the Scales. This gives your agile and finesse weapons the Backstabber trait, making your attacks against flat-footed enemies deal a whole extra 1 damage, or 2 if it's a +3 weapon. This isn't a good feat for a level 9 Ancestry, especially when you can get Backstabber from first level if you take the Fangwire and Tricky Pick. So something a little better might be Briar Battler, which lets you use the take cover action in natural difficult terrain. It's nice, but you can just be behind actual cover and have a passive +2 to your AC, so again, might want to choose something else here. Thankfully, we do have Close Quarters, which allows you to end your movement in another small ally space. It does require that you have another small ally in the party, but if you do, it's very useful for close quarters combat, like in dungeons. I would take this on a tank or a rogue so that you have more options in tight combat scenarios. And that's sort of it for the Sneaky Stabbers. They're supposed to capitalize on a kobold's unique tactics, but a lot of the higher level feats fall short of that fantasy. They've got some good picks here and there for specific scenarios, but there could definitely be more and better feats for those kobold tacticians out there. Though again, you don't have to go down any specific path with your feat choices, they're just meant to be thematic. But what's more thematic than a pathetic kobold? Our last path, the Cringe Kobold, emphasizes a kobold's ability to pull on the heartstrings of their enemies, or just hide behind their friends. The first feat is aptly named Cringe. When you're hit with a critical strike, you posture so pitifully that your foe pulls their punches, decreasing their damage of the crit by 2 plus your level. But once you cringe, your enemy is immune to your cringe for 24 hours. Besides its hilarious effect, it's pretty good on low AC characters who may get crit more often than not. But keep in mind that cringe is mental and emotional, so enemies who have no minds or are emotionless don't care for your cringe. Moving on, Allies Shelter at level 5 lets you hide behind your friends. As a reaction against a saving throw, you can use your allies' save instead of your own, as long as you're next to them. While a clingy kobold may be annoying to your party, they'll be sticking to those who have the highest saves for that encounter. It's actually a nice way to emphasize teamwork and gives you some more tactical thinking to do. Finally, we have a feat that I'm not sure has much use at all. I'm talking about Grovel, which lets you feint at range. That seems great, but feint makes the enemy flat-footed to your melee attacks, and I'm not sure that there's any effect, even with swashbucklers, that lets you benefit from feint with a ranged weapon. The only good thing about feinting from range is that if you critical fail, your enemy can't take advantage of it. If you know how to make use of this, please let me know in the comments. The Cringe Kobold doesn't have a lot of feats, but every one of them is so full of flavor. With Cringe, for example, it's not exclusive to pathetic kobolds, as a trickster could play it off as just a manipulative tactic. And it's even funnier to imagine what a Hell Knight kobold could do with Cringe. Overall, kobolds are such a versatile ancestry that'll completely change the playstyle of any single class in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Even with just the feats alone, there's so much to have fun with here. If you've never played a kobold before, Pathfinder 2nd Edition is the best time to try. Between laying traps, casting draconic magic, using guerrilla warfare, and just being plain cringe, kobolds have it all. Hey guys, I'm back. I'm trying something new with this video, so let me know how you like it and what I can improve. I'm also not completely done with Foundry, so you can expect a few more of those videos. I'm also DMing a Pathfinder 2nd Edition game with my friends, one of which is streaming the game, so check out their Twitch at the description below. We play on Thursday nights from 6:30 to 9:30 CST. I'll also be uploading the campaign to YouTube if you're wanting to watch some other stream at the exact same time. Finally, I'm wanting to run more Pathfinder 2nd Edition, so I've set myself up on startplaying.games. Having played Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, I'm excited to check out some of Paizo's new modules in the world of Golarion, so if you're wanting to have yours truly as your DM, utilizing all the great modules I've shown off, check out my campaigns at the link below. Otherwise, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, and subscribe if you want to see more Pathfinder content. I'll see you guys next time, and thanks for watching.